Is Britain going down the toilet?
Hello and welcome to the Mark and Pete Show. High streets, retail parks, and indeed shopping centres are now buzzing with life, again since the coronavirus lockdown has been eased across England. However, there is a growing concern that public toilets still remain closed. So what does that mean for the public? How do they spend their pounds? In fact, they can't even spend a penny. Well, it does seem that life is getting worse. And here's a philosophical debate. Life is like a toilet bowl. One day you're flush and then on the dole. As you find another goal, you get the brush, which just takes its toll. Like paper on a scroll, you turn to mush and then lose control. Finally, you see your role, but you get the push and go down a hole. Clergyman Pete, I ask you this important question. Is Britain really going down the toilet?
Well, businessman Mark, I think that there's a real problem with access to toilets. I mean, if you're out in public and you're caught short, you need to be able to spend a penny when you need to spend a penny. You can't hold it in necessarily. Well, obviously you can to a certain extent, but if you're going to be encouraging people, just to be serious for a moment, if you're going to be encouraging people to eat and to drink, even through takeaway outlets, I suppose especially if it's through takeaway outlets, you need to have toilets accessible. That could be through council-run public toilets, or it could be through access to toilets within establishments. But still, you've got to open it. Otherwise, we really will go down the toilet, because it'd be such an unpleasant experience being out and about if when you need to go, you can't.
Well, quite. Yes, nothing could be worse. But in fact, it is putting people off. Reports are saying that many people are actually refusing to go back to the high street, not simply because, they're worried about COVID-19, although that is one concern. Ironically, the lack of toilet facilities is something that is on their minds. Now, there is another factor here, which is, of course, we're still in a COVID-19 situation, and many people are concerned that the practice of going to the toilet, how are you going to orchestrate this? So pubs are normally a very sort of closed-in environment, and you have to be almost certainly within 2 meters, hence why many people are calling for the fact that the rules should be changed. So that means that there's also a practical side, even if public toilets were opened and more were made available. But I did want to sort of ask you just a few statistical questions here, Clergyman Pete, just to get a sense of what your thoughts are on public toilets. So this is in the United Kingdom. How many public toilets are currently available in the United Kingdom that just actually exist, not necessarily are open, but
that exist? I would say approximately 20,000.
No. And this is part of the problem, because what's happened over the last
20,000?
years... No, they're nowhere near.
Goodness.
Well, there were considerably more. So what's been happening over the course of the last 10 years and subsequent governments is that they've been closing public toilets, partly because they...
I was aware of that, yes.
Unsanitary, but also because they've been costly. Yeah. There are now only 11,000. But here we go, Clergyman Pete. When we think about those that are maintained by councils, how many are maintained by the councils?
Oh, now if you're saying that there's only 11,000 altogether...
Yes, but which are maintained by the councils.
And that's just in existence.
Yeah.
Now, I know, because I've heard reports that there are some available, so I'm going to say 5,000.
Well, that's a very good guess.
Is
Unfortunately... It's less.
A good guess, but wrong.
486.
Okay.
And still counting. However, the one thing that is notable here is that you can see a trend that we are losing our ability to provide these type of facilities.
Yes, and this is an issue, just to interrupt, that this is an issue particularly at the moment, because many establishments where people might have just popped in to go to the toilet, which are actually other... there was another main reason for the establishment, be it a cafe or whatever, people can't pop in anymore because they're closed. So
Yeah.
having the public toilets is even more important.
Yep. Well, now here we go, folks, because Raymond Martin, yes, he is the managing director of the British Toilet Association, the BTA, and he has called upon the government to, in his words, put some serious thought into regulation and funding of changes to public toilets, saying they are a human right and a human need. People are coming out of their houses and they have to use the toilet. Quite naturally so. The government wants people to come out and spend their money, but this is about health and well-being. Yes, it's very true. Now, I have some thoughts here. So from a business point of view, I want to perhaps maybe offer some suggestions. One of the reasons why councils are closing them is because you have to maintain them. That's very costly. Not only do you have to service them, so you have to have somebody there to put that in place. Now, I still believe that the public would be prepared to go back to, yes, dare I say, spend a penny to have to spend a penny. And that is that you actually do charge the public. And I think that many of the members of the public would understand that. So that's one level where it could ease the burden on the public coffers, should we say. The other thing is that, and I know that this has been considered, which is those businesses who are closely high street related and or other public sites, I think should be opened where the public can actually use the facilities. Now, I know that this needs some careful thought, but there are many cafe bars, clothes stores, etc., that do have staff facilities, restrooms, etc. And it is quite natural for the public, as you say, when they're going about their business, especially if they're filling up with liquid and food.
Sometimes you need to go.
At some point, nature dominates. And I think that there's got to be some better consideration here. The high street is really up against it here. We know that the business has been hit badly by COVID-19. Going into 2020, it was still depleted anyway, simply the fact that many people have been moving their business models online. But to try and save the high street, you've got to incentivize people to come. Now, whatever that business happens to be and whatever their incentive is, you've got to make it easy for the public to be comfortable. And I believe that, unfortunately, whether it be the retail associations, the local councils, and the government, need to collaborate here. I don't see a joined-up thinking in terms of being able to offer public services. So my concern here is that I don't think that the government is helping. But ironically, I don't think people who are on the high street, whether they are public or private businesses, are also helping the economy either. Now, I just want to come back to this point. You being a tax-paying person, clergyman Pete, let me ask you, would you be prepared to pay some fee to use a public facility?
Oh, yes. I mean, I would expect to, I guess. I think if someone is providing a service, I expect to pay. So I don't have an issue with that at all.
Right. Now, that would mean, so somebody like yourself who has a family, obviously some people, I'm just thinking of the counter argument, would say, well, that's very expensive. If you've got 100 children to take off to a shopping centre, that could get
I agree,
very expensive.
But here's my point, you see. I know this is maybe controversial, but I think you should have it being attended, that is to say, an attendant at each toilet.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
Could say there's a family right, and I think having,
and that used to be the case. Ironically.
Well, yes. Now here's the problem: we have had a problem with toilets being abused in that they were left filthy, but also people getting up to nefarious activities in there.
Yes, I don't know why you did that.
And yes, and those issues of people mistrusting the public toilets because of people misbehaving in there, or because of of them just leaving a mess, would be ameliorated if you just had someone there, an attendant. And we moved away from that because it's cheaper, but it's not cheaper in the long run, as seen by the fact that a lot of them closed down. So I think that you can change. because I think if you had an attendant there, you charged enough, you could cover your costs. I think a well-run, clean toilet. Going to the toilet is one of the pleasures in life, isn't it? It doesn't harm anyone, and yet afterwards you feel cleansed, relieved, and happy. It's one of those activities that we enjoy in life, and no one looks down on us for doing it. It's one of those things where you don't feel guilty for doing it. Yes, it's extremely pleasurable. So I think we should afford people that luxury, but it really is important to have things made convenient for people if you're going to expect them to go out and use the high street. And
not literally.
Well, exactly.
That's the problem.
Not literally, because you want them to go into the shops and to the banks, etc. Then you need to have the public toilets open or access to them, as you say. But there is another issue. I just want to bring this up. People have said, in a reasonable question, what about the spread of COVID-19 whilst going to the toilet?
Exactly.
Now, while the 2-meter social distancing rule is in place, it would make it difficult. Now, for the ladies listening, you may not be aware of this, but in fact, some toilets, less so these days, but some toilets, less common these days, but some toilets have one long sort of trough-like urinal. Now, men would normally stand there, cheek by jowl, sort of thing, very close anyway. And that would be unacceptable. So you'd have to somehow divide up the space. You could do that easily with some sort of tape, a marking off where people could stand. Individual urinals, you could just block off every other one. So it could be done, but hopefully this will not be the case, as in there won't be a 2-meter rule in place pretty soon. But when it comes to cubicles, of course, you can say, well, there is some sort of division between, but there's of course plenty of room for air to move around because of the very nature. You want a bit of ventilation, otherwise it's going to become unbearable. So again, you may have to have every other cubicle being allowed to be used. Now, then we come to another issue, and that is the spray effect from flushing. Now, say you, Mark, were to defecate in a public toilet. What would happen to the feces if, in fact, you were infected with COVID-19? Would it affect other people? Now, the tiny droplets or aerosols containing your feces when you flush the toilet would spread across the entire room. Even though you've got feces around it, your feces, and I'm looking at you, Mark, your feces would be spread out and would in some way be affecting everyone in the entire room. However, at the moment, the scientists are saying that studies, including going back to the MERS coronavirus outbreak in 2012. There was evidence that the viruses could survive in the human digestive tract, but there's no evidence that this coronavirus can do so. So at the moment, it's looking like on balance, it's not a problem. The flushing isn't a problem, so you can go ahead, Mark. You don't need to worry about that.
Well,
but that's only on balance.
Scientific detail is always very important,
yes.
and we love it on our show. However, I've got a slightly different view here, and this is something which personally I feel that councils should consider. But before I tell you my idea, what slightly annoyed me was that the local government association said the opening or the reopening of public toilets was a local decision for councils who should follow government guidance. Now, a spokeswoman from the LGA said people should not assume toilets will be open and plan their journeys and outdoor activities accordingly. And I thought, well, this person, from a scientific point of view, probably hasn't understood bodily behavior. But I think this is where we can be a little bit smarter, accepting that fixed-based toilets are a difficult thing to manage and maintain. Sure. But pop-up toilets are much easier. they're cheaper. And so, as we've seen in many other areas, like in festivals and in many other places where they are temporary arrangements, councils could actually have those pop-up toilets being attended by, as you say, a toilet attendant. So there is a job there, and I think that the paying public would be prepared to put their pennies down where appropriate, and what that would mean is that you could then remove them in less peak times. Typically, people, certainly as we're starting to open up more and more in society, those traditional days when people sort of typically go around shopping are starting to come back, as we're seeing. We're seeing the uplift on a Friday or Saturday, and those are often being the peak retail days. So often what you could do is you can have those extra pop-up toilets appearing, and the public would pay. And to me, that's one of the solutions. I'm slightly worried that I think that local councils, retailers, and indeed governments aren't really thinking about this, because the public do. When you leave your house, you naturally think about where your keys are, where you've got your wallet, etc. But one of the things that most people do, let's get down to basics here, is you think, am I ready to go out in a comfortable way? And you've been to the toilet, knowing that you're going to plan your journey. Now, most people would think about, certainly a shopping facility or a retail park would have these public facilities. So surely, folks, from a business point of view, business associations and businesses should provide for the public. Otherwise, why would they go? And this is what I think is a little bit bizarre, because I don't think enough planning has been done, not just because of the COVID-19 and the social distancing thing, but even if we didn't have it, this problem has been on the table for some time. I say that metaphorically speaking.
Yeah, I hope so.
So,
yes.
Clergyman Pete, is it now at a time when if we want the high street to succeed, we've got to start thinking a little bit more entrepreneurially to enable people to be able to feel comfortable and incentivize them to go. And you want to, if you want to do that, you've got to make sure the facilities are there. Otherwise, it's only going to just become a desert. Is that true?
I agree with that, and I would go further and say you've got to open up completely. The time has passed when you can make sort of baby steps towards opening. You can't take too long over it because the economy will just collapse. We've got to get things started again. You've got to get people out, spending, enjoying themselves, and you've got to get businesses thriving. Of course, we also want to get the manufacturing businesses that we've got left in the country up and thriving as well. But the high street is part of this, and we need to get back completely. I've got a Bible verse now in the pre-show meeting. Listeners will be delighted to hear. Mark often asks me, gentle listener, he says, is there a Bible verse about this? And is there a Bible verse, he asked me, about public toilets? And of course, there is the famous verse in Isaiah 36, verse 12, in which Rabshakeh says, talking to people about the possibility of going to war with Assyria, says, has my master sent me to speak these words to your master and to you, and not to the men sitting on the wall who are doomed with you to eat their own dung and drink their own urine? And I think we can all take that to heart.
Mm.
No, but actually, although I was just a silly use of that verse, it's interesting, in fact, that in that verse, he's talking to people who are sitting on the wall and they can't understand what he's going on about, and they're taking no action. Now, Rabshakeh is the enemy of the people, the enemy of God, but still the point could stand that you've got to make a decision. So we've got to make that decision, and we don't want to end up eating our own dung and drinking our own urine. We don't want to end up without toilets being available or any other convenience facilities that would stop people getting out there and the economy being able to launch.
Yes, well, listeners, what do you think? I mean, this I know might seem like a trivial subject, but it is a serious matter. You know, whether you've got a family, whether you're somebody who perhaps has certain needs, and you need those facilities to be available. And we're trying to build, a more caring society, and we certainly need to do that in 2020 because of obvious issues that have impacted us this year. So why not log on to markandpete.com and let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you on this matter. Should the councils be doing a lot more, or should the responsibility now be with the retailers themselves? Well, we look forward to hearing from you. Well, join us again next time for more topical topics with Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark.